There's a truth about you that the universe knows, but you've forgotten. A truth so simple, so obvious, that it's gone unnoticed your entire life. You are not who you think you are. You are who you declare yourself to be. And the proof of this is happening right now, at this exact moment, as you read these words. Your brain is processing information, your neurons are firing in specific patterns, and without you realizing it, you're transmitting an electromagnetic signal to the field around you. This signal isn't random. It carries a very specific signature, a frequency you've been repeating for years, perhaps decades, without ever questioning its power. 2 words, just 2 words that come out of your mouth dozens of times a day and determine absolutely everything in your life. I am. Stop for a second and think about how many times you said those words today. I'm tired. I'm anxious. I'm terrible with money. I'm unlucky in love. Or maybe you said, I'm strong. I'm capable. I'm blessed. It doesn't matter which version you chose. What matters is that you weren't simply describing something, you were decreeing. You were sending a direct command to your subconscious and an instruction to the energy field that permeates all reality. And here's what no one has told you. The universe, or more precisely, the quantum field of possibilities, doesn't interpret your words. It responds to the frequency they carry. It doesn't judge whether what you're saying is good or bad for you. It simply receives the signal, decodes the frequency, and reality begins to reorganize itself to match what you declared. This isn't magical thinking. It's what neuroscience is beginning to document, what quantum physics suggests through its boldest interpretations. It's the most powerful mechanism of influence over your own reality that exists, and you're using it right now, consciously or unconsciously. If you're watching this video, if something inside you resonated with these opening words, then do something for me and for yourself right now. Subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell, because what I'm about to reveal in the next few minutes isn't just information. It's a transformative technology that will completely change how you understand and use the power of your own identity. This isn't another video about positive thinking or the law of attraction. This is about the intersection between neuroscience and consciousness, about how your brain is literally programmed to respond to I am commands, and about how you can, starting today, begin to reprogram that system to create tangible changes in your life experience. Science is finally approaching what contemplative traditions have always suggested, the observer effect in quantum physics, though it primarily applies to the subatomic world, offers us a powerful metaphor. The act of observing can influence what is observed. But what determines how you observe? Your identity. Your I am. When you say, I am, followed by any declaration, you're not making a casual observation about yourself. In the framework we're exploring, you're selecting, from all available neurological and behavioral possibilities, which pattern will dominate your experience. You're activating specific neural networks, releasing particular neurotransmitters, creating a biochemical cascade that literally shapes your perception and your actions. And what's most fascinating, most liberating, is that you do this all the time, with every declaration, with every automatic thought, with every identity pattern you repeat without awareness. But here's the central problem that almost no one understands, and that's sabotaging your life at this exact moment. Your current I am wasn't consciously chosen by you. It was programmed. Programmed by your childhood, by your traumas, by others' opinions, by your past failures. Neuroscience shows us that between ages 0 and 7, the brain operates predominantly in theta waves, the same state used in hypnotherapy. You literally spent your first years in a highly suggestible state, installing identity programs without any critical filter, and now that program is running on autopilot, transmitting the same limited frequency day after day, creating the same restricted reality you experience as if it were unchangeable. You think you're stuck in your life, but the truth is much more disturbing and much more hopeful at the same time. You're stuck in the neural patterns of your identity, and in the next segment, I'm going to show you exactly how this mechanism works at the neurological level, and why trying to change your life without changing your I am is like trying to change the movie without changing the projector. Imagine your brain is a broadcasting station that never shuts off. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, it's generating specific patterns of neural activity. These patterns aren't just conscious thoughts, they're complex electrochemical configurations, a neurological signature that's the sum total of everything you believe to be true about yourself. And at the center of that configuration, like the system's main program, is your I am. Every time you repeat an identity declaration, you're strengthening specific synaptic connections, making certain thoughts and behavior patterns more automatic, harder to change. But here's where neuroscience becomes both fascinating and disturbing. 95% of your mental activity is happening below the level of your consciousness. Your brain processes approximately 11 million bits of information per second, but your conscious mind can only process about 40 bits. This means the vast majority of your decisions, reactions, and behaviors are being governed by programs you don't even know exist. Consider the documented case we'll call Protocol Alpha, an individual operating with an I am of chronic scarcity, manifested in measurable metrics, growing financial debt, consistently missed opportunities, documented self-sabotage patterns. Brain scans showed chronic activation of the amygdala, the fear center, whenever financial issues arose. The prefrontal cortex, responsible for rational decisions, showed reduced activity. In neurological terms, this individual was literally programmed for failure. But then something changed. Instead of trying to force new behaviors, the protocol focused on the root, neural identity. Through specific techniques I'll detail shortly, the fundamental I am was systematically reprogrammed. The results, within 72 hours, measurable changes in brain activity. Within 2 weeks, new behavior patterns emerging spontaneously. Within 2 months, a completely different external reality. Dr. Bruce Lipton, a cell biologist with a PhD from the University of Virginia, proposes something even more profound in his research on epigenetics. Your cells, all trillions of them, have receptors that respond to chemical signals from your brain. When you transmit "I'm sick," "I'm weak," "I'm incapable," your brain releases a specific cocktail of hormones and neurotransmitters that your cells interpret as commands. According to Lipton's theory, this can affect gene expression. It's not just metaphor, it's biology. Your I am is potentially influencing which genes are activated or silenced. You're not just thinking you are something. You're, in a sense, instructing your body to become that at the molecular level. And while the mainstream scientific community debates the extent of these claims, the basic principle that thoughts affect biology through chemical mediators is well established. Now, let's explore a fascinating interpretation of quantum physics that, while speculative, offers a powerful framework for understanding identity. Physicist John Wheeler proposed the concept of a participatory universe, suggesting that observation plays a fundamental role in the manifestation of reality. While this primarily applies to the quantum world, we can use it as a rich metaphor. Your identity, your I am, functions as your default observation mode. Electrons in the famous double-slit experiment behave differently when observed versus when not observed. Similarly, your life manifests differently based on how you observe it through the lens of your I am. So when you wake up in the morning and the first thing you think is "I'm exhausted," you're not just observing your tiredness. You're activating a specific neurological cascade. Your hypothalamus releases stress hormones, your cortisol production increases, your cellular energy levels decrease. When you look at your bank account and automatically think "I'm broke," you're activating the same neural circuits that have kept you in scarcity, releasing the same neurotransmitters that produce anxiety and fear, creating the same internal state that sabotages opportunities. Your brain is obeying you with pharmaceutical precision, and this keeps happening moment after moment, thought after thought, in an infinite cascade of neurological creation. You think you're living your life, but you're actually living your neural programming. The most challenging part of all this, you try to change. You read the books, do the affirmations, visualize success, but nothing changes permanently. Know why? Because you're trying to install new software without updating the operating system. You're shouting "I'm rich" on the surface, while your deep neural circuits are firing "I'm unworthy." And guess which signal is stronger? The one with more myelination, more synaptic connections, more years of repetition. That's why willpower alone rarely works. That's why superficial positive thinking fails. Because as long as your fundamental I am remains encoded in your deepest neural circuits, as long as your neural firing patterns remain the same, your brain has no choice but to keep creating the same internal experience, which inevitably reflects in the external experience. The biggest mistake you're making right now isn't what you think. It's not lack of discipline. It's not lack of focus. It's not even lack of knowledge. The fatal error keeping you trapped in a reality you don't want is much more subtle and much more fundamental. You're trying to change the effects without touching the cause. It's like trying to clean your image in the mirror by wiping the glass. No matter how much you wipe, how hard you try, how much you attempt, the image stays the same, because what's being reflected, you, remains neurologically unchanged. And that's the tragedy documented in countless studies on behavioral change. People obsessively focus on the external world, on circumstances, on behaviors, on results, while the source of everything, the neural reality generator, that is the I am, continues transmitting the same patterns as always. Let's examine concrete data. A longitudinal study followed individuals who tried to change through conventional methods versus those who focused on identity reprogramming. All those traditional techniques, the visualizations, vision boards, gratitude lists, even affirmations, showed limited effectiveness when applied without fundamental identity change. Why? Because you were doing them from the wrong identity. Imagine trying to run cutting-edge software on obsolete hardware. It doesn't matter how advanced the program is. The system can't process it properly. And your I am is that hardware. When you say are abundant 500 times a day, but your neural circuits are configured for scarcity, when every cell in your body is habituated to the chemicals of fear and lack, when your neurons automatically fire patterns of deficiency, whenever you think about money, your brain isn't receiving mixed messages. It's executing the strongest program, the most established, the most myelinated. And that program doesn't come from your conscious words. It comes from your unconscious neural patterns. Let me clarify something about how the brain really processes information. Neuroscience shows us that the brain responds to what you are neurologically, not what you consciously desire. Completely, entirely, exclusively to what your neural patterns dictate. And what you are is encoded in your neural I am. Contemplative traditions always knew this intuitively. When historical figures spoke about identity and being, they were, in essence, describing what we now understand as dominant neural configurations. But we took that wisdom and transformed it into something superficial, into pretty phrases we repeat, without any neurological incorporation, without any coherence between the conscious and unconscious, without any synaptic truth. And there's more. Your brain has what neuroscientists call a prediction error detector. It's constantly comparing your internal expectations with external reality. When you declare "I'm a millionaire," while your reality shows you're in debt, your brain doesn't just reject the new programming. It reinforces the old through a process called memory reconsolidation. Every failed attempt at superficial change only deepens the neural grooves of the identity trying to escape. That's why many people who practice personal development techniques end up feeling worse, because every time they try and fail, every time reality doesn't change, they're unconsciously strengthening the circuits of "I'm a failure, I'm someone for whom nothing works." But here's the revelation that changes everything, based on decades of research in neuroplasticity. The problem was never that you can't change. The human brain maintains the ability to form new neural connections throughout life. The problem is that you're trying to change from the same I am that created the problem. As Einstein supposedly said, we cannot solve problems using the same level of thinking that created them. But the neurological truth is more radical. You cannot create new neural patterns using the same old circuits. It's biologically impossible. Neurons that fire together wire together, as Hebb's principle states. And the neurons of your current I am only know how to fire in the patterns they've always known. To access a different reality, you need to activate different neural circuits, not pretend they exist, not act as if they existed, but literally create and strengthen new synaptic pathways. And this is exactly where most people give up. Because changing behaviors is uncomfortable, but changing neural identity is initially disorienting. It means experiencing what neuroscience calls synaptic pruning, where old connections die, and neurogenesis, where new connections are born. It means entering what researchers call a period of neural instability, where you're no longer who you were, but not yet who you'll be. Most people prefer the familiar prison of known neural circuits to the temporary discomfort of synaptic reorganization. But you're not most people, or you wouldn't still be here, absorbing every word, feeling that neural agitation that happens when your brain recognizes a truth that can reorganize everything. Now I'm going to share the exact protocol that dissolves the old I am and installs the new one. But first I need you to understand a fundamental discovery about neuroplasticity. There's a moment, a specific brain state, where your brain is exponentially more receptive to reprogramming. It's the hypnagogic state, those precious minutes between sleep and waking, when you're waking up but not yet fully conscious. In that state, your brain waves are naturally in theta, between 4 and 8 Hz, exactly like when you were a child. The barrier between conscious and subconscious is temporarily dissolved. It's the window of opportunity where you can access and rewrite the neural code without the resistance of established patterns. And that's exactly where the protocol begins. Analysis of Case Sigma. A group of individuals was instructed to implement the following protocol for 21 days. Tomorrow morning, before opening your eyes, before checking your phone, before even moving completely, you're going to do something that seems simple but is neurologically powerful. You're going to declare your new I am 3 times, but not as an empty affirmation, as a neural activation. As if you were remembering something that was always true, but had been temporarily forgotten. I am the source of infinite abundance. Not I want to be, not I will be, not I am trying to be. I am, present, definitive, neurologically established. And here's the secret that transforms this from an empty affirmation into synaptic reprogramming. While you declare, you're going to activate what neuroscience calls embodied cognition. Not just think, but feel somatically. How does your body feel when you are abundant, lighter, more expansive? Do your shoulders relax? Does your chest open? Find the somatic sensation and hold it for 60 full seconds while the new circuits begin to form. But the protocol goes further, because interrupting old neural patterns requires more than just morning programming. During the day, you're going to implement what researchers call neural pattern interruption. Every time you catch yourself saying or thinking a limiting I am, you're going to execute this 3-phase process validated in multiple studies. First phase, recognition without judgment. Just observe the old pattern firing. Here are the old neural circuits activating again. Second phase, conscious interruption. Take a deep breath and declare internally, I interrupt this neural pattern. You're literally creating what neuroscientists call synaptic inhibition, preventing the signal from continuing down the usual path. Third phase, neural redirection. Immediately replace with the new I am, but do it with what the Hartmouth Institute calls psychophysiological coherence. Let me explain the science behind this. The Hartmouth Institute documented that when you enter cardiac coherence, when your heart rhythm becomes regular and harmonic, you produce a significantly more organized electromagnetic field. The heart's magnetic field is approximately 100 times stronger than the brain's and can be detected several meters away from the body. When you combine the I am declaration with cardiac coherence, you're creating what we can call psychophysiological resonance. Place your hand on your heart. Activate a genuine feeling of gratitude or appreciation for 3 to 5 seconds. This instantly changes your physiological state. And then declare the new I am from that state of coherence. Studies show this exponentially amplifies the formation of new neural circuits. Why does this work neurologically? Because you're not fighting against the old pattern, you're creating an alternative pathway. It's like building a new road instead of trying to repair the old one while still driving on it. With each repetition, with each interruption of the old pattern and activation of the new, you're strengthening new synaptic connections through a process called long-term potentiation. Dendrites grow, synapses multiply, myelination increases, making the new neural pathway increasingly efficient. But here comes the part that separates those who succeed from those who quit. In the first days, maybe the first weeks, you're going to experience what neuroscience calls synaptic competition. The old and new circuits will compete for dominance. You'll feel cognitive dissonance, a sense of artificiality, as if you're playing a role that isn't yours. Your nervous system will activate what's known as the threat response to uncertainty. Your amygdala may fire alarm signals. Your anterior cingulate cortex will detect the conflict between old and new. Your conscious mind will question the validity of the process. This isn't failure. This is neural reorganization in real time. It's what happens when two sets of neural circuits, the established old and the emerging new, are simultaneously active. It's neurologically uncomfortable, but it's also the unmistakable signal that change is happening. Neuroimaging studies show that this period of instability always precedes the consolidation of new neural patterns. Most people interpret this discomfort as evidence that it doesn't work and give up. They don't understand that the discomfort is neurological evidence that it works. What I'm about to reveal now may seem like science fiction, but it's based on documented principles of neuroscience and fascinating interpretations of quantum physics. When you understand what really happens in the brain the moment you declare I am, when you comprehend the neurological mechanisms and quantum metaphors behind that identity shift, you'll never use those two words unconsciously again. Get ready, because this is going to completely expand your understanding of how consciousness interacts with reality. At the neural level, at this exact moment, there are billions of possible configurations of your brain circuits. Neuroscience shows us that the brain operates in attractor states, stable patterns of neural activity that the system tends to return to. Each identity you would assume corresponds to a different attractor state, a unique configuration of neural activity. Your confident version has a specific pattern of neural firing. Your anxious version has another completely different one. Your prosperous version activates circuits that your scarcity version can't even access. All these states exist as potentials in your neural architecture. And what determines which configuration becomes dominant? The patterns you reinforce through repetition, especially when charged with emotion. And nothing carries more emotional and neural weight than the I am declaration. Let's explore a fascinating interpretation that connects neuroscience with physics concepts. John Wheeler, one of the giants of 20th century physics, proposed that we live in a participatory universe. While he was talking about quantum physics, we can use this as a powerful metaphor to understand the brain. You're not just observing your life through your neural circuits. You're actively participating in creating your experience through the patterns you choose to reinforce. When you declare I'm anxious, you're not just activating anxiety circuits. You're instructing your entire brain to organize your perception, your physiology, your decisions around that identity, instantly, without delay, without question. Your nervous system reorganizes its priorities, its attention, its hormones, everything to match that neural selection. Researchers at the Weizmann Institute demonstrated in 1998 that in the quantum world, the intensity of observation affects the experiment's outcome. The stronger the observation, the greater the effect on the observed system. We can use this as a powerful analogy. In your brain, the intensity of your I am declaration, the degree of neural and emotional conviction, determines how deeply you consolidate that identity. Feeling kind of happy generates partial neural activation. When you're completely fulfilled, you activate total neural cascades, releasing specific neurotransmitters, creating coherent global brain states. The intensity, the conviction, the total coherence of your I am determines how completely you activate and reinforce the corresponding neural circuits. But here's where it gets even more fascinating. Dr. Stuart Hamroff and Sir Roger Penrose controversially proposed that consciousness might emerge from quantum processes happening in the microtubules of neurons. While this theory is debated, it offers an intriguing metaphor. Your brain may operate on multiple levels of reality simultaneously. At the classical level, neurons fire and synapses connect. But at a more fundamental level, perhaps quantum processes influence which neural possibilities manifest. Your brain is, metaphorically speaking, constantly selecting which neural configuration dominates your experience. And the I am command is what we can imagine as the software instructing that biological hardware about which neural reality to render. Let me share data from a thought experiment you can validate. Close your eyes for 10 seconds and declare with total conviction, I am a completely different person than I was 5 minutes ago. Don't specify how, just feel that truth neurologically. Activate different neural circuits, open your eyes. Notice how your perception subtly changed, how your body state altered, how your thoughts took a different direction. You just experienced a neural state change. You activated a different configuration of brain circuits. Now imagine doing this with total intensity, with complete psychophysiological coherence, with every neuron aligned. Imagine the level of neural reorganization you could create, the version of you that you could neurologically activate. We've reached the moment where all theory transforms into practice, where neuroscience becomes lived experience, where I am stops being a concept and becomes an active neural command. I'm going to share data from a case study that perfectly illustrates this process. Consider Protocol Omega, implemented with a control group. Participants presented initial metrics of chronic stress, documented financial scarcity, dysfunctional relationship patterns. Brain scans showed amygdala hyperactivity, low prefrontal cortex activity, and brainwave patterns consistent with chronic anxiety states. The implemented protocol was precise. Instead of empty affirmations, instead of forced visualizations, instead of trying to change external behaviors, participants executed a neural identity reprogramming process. They didn't decide to try, they decided to be. I am prosperous, they declared. But this time every brain region was engaged. Neuroimaging studies showed something extraordinary. There was no normal doubt, no conflict between brain regions, no limbic system resistance. There was only the established neurological fact that I am prosperous, and any contrary external evidence was processed as temporary delay in synchronization between internal and external reality. What happened in the first 72 hours was documented precisely. Externally, nothing visibly changed. But internally, brainwave patterns began to shift. Coherence between different brain regions increased. Cortisol levels decreased. Heart rate variability, a marker of nervous system resilience, significantly improved. Scarcity thoughts still arose, but something fascinating happened. They didn't find the usual neural receptors. It was as if the circuits that normally amplified those thoughts had been disconnected. On the second day, synchronicities began. Opportunities that always existed but were never perceived became visible. Why? Because the brain's reticular activating system, The filter that determines what you notice had been reprogrammed. On the third day, spontaneous behavioral changes emerged. Without conscious effort, without willpower, participants began making different decisions. Within 2 weeks, external metrics began to change drastically. Let me explain the critical difference between request and neural decree. A request implies you don't have and hope to receive. Neurologically, this keeps lax circuits active. A decree states that you already are, and the brain must align. Stanford researchers demonstrated that when you assume an identity with total certainty, without neural conflict, your brain doesn't question. It executes. It's like updating your computer's operating system. You don't ask the hardware for permission. You simply install the update, and the system reorganizes to function with the new programming. But here's what separates temporary change from permanent transformation: total psychophysiological coherence. When you decree "I'm healthy," but your body is tense with fear. When you declare "I'm loved," but your heart is contracted. When you affirm "I'm abundant," but your nervous system is in survival mode, you're creating what neuroscientists call neural dissonance. Conflicting signals that cancel each other out. Effective neural decree requires total alignment, brain, heart, and body operating on the same frequency. So how do you create that total coherence? First, you need to prepare the nervous system. Before declaring the new "I am," you need to create what researchers call a state of increased neural plasticity. Sit in silence. Activate your diaphragmatic breathing. Lower your brainwaves. Declare internally, "I release all neural patterns that no longer serve my highest good." Feel your nervous system relax, as if you were shutting down unnecessary programs running in the background. Now, from that state of neural availability, from that 0 point of synaptic potential, declare your new "I am," but don't declare just with your conscious mind. Engage your entire nervous system. Imagine every neuron vibrating with that declaration. Visualize your neural circuits reorganizing in real time. And then, the most critical step, validated by decades of behavioral research: immediate neural action. Make a decision, however small, that only someone with that identity would make. If you decreed "I'm confident," stand up and adopt the body posture of confidence. Amy Cuddy's studies at Harvard showed that 2 minutes of power posing significantly alter testosterone and cortisol levels. If you decreed "I'm prosperous," make a micro-decision of prosperity. The brain needs behavioral evidence to consolidate the new neural identity. But here's the warning science gives us. The first weeks of a new neural identity can be neurologically challenging. Your brain is trying to reconcile 2 sets of circuits: the established old and the emerging new. This can cause what researchers call increased decision fatigue, as your brain spends more energy navigating between patterns. Temporary mental confusion, while new synaptic connections form. Emotional fluctuations, as different neural systems compete for dominance. Many people interpret this as a sign that something's wrong and try to return to the old "I am." Critical neurological error. That discomfort is the price of neuroplasticity. It's your brain reorganizing in real time. The final truth that neuroscience and our exploration of quantum metaphors reveal is this: you were never neurologically trapped. You were choosing, moment after moment, "I am after I am," which neural circuits to reinforce. And now that you understand the mechanism, now that you know the protocol, you become something rare. Someone who consciously sculpts their own neural architecture. The highest version of you isn't in the future waiting to be reached. It exists now as a neural potential, a set of circuits waiting to be activated, a configuration of synapses waiting only for the right time to awaken. What's at stake here transcends personal improvement. It's about you finally activating the neural circuits that were always available but never accessed. There's a configuration of your brain that operates in constant flow, in coherence, in power. That version isn't fantasy. It's as neurologically real as the current version. The only difference is the neural firing patterns, the I am that each one is transmitting, and you have the power, through neuroplasticity, to migrate from one configuration to another. If this material resonated in your neural circuits, if you felt that recognition activation when the truths were revealed, then 3 actions are necessary now. First, subscribe and turn on all notifications to receive the next neural reprogramming protocols. Second, declare your new I am in the comments. Do it publicly, because public declaration creates what social psychology calls the commitment and consistency principle. Third, implement the protocol today. Every moment of delay is a moment where the old circuits strengthen through continued use. The I am you choose in the next moments will determine which neural circuits will dominate your brain, what your electromagnetic signature will be, which version of you will emerge. The question isn't whether change is neurologically possible. Neuroplasticity guarantees it is. The question is, do you have the courage to declare and neurologically embody who you choose to be? Which neural configuration will you activate today?